19th, 2020. I am Shale Riley. Welcome to the Yang Gang Roundtable, a basic income advocacy podcast where we also talk about electoral politics and poverty a lot because the three are interconnected. And we have Rob Placone here. I hope I got your name right. Placone?
It's Placone, but
Look,
close
Ron.
enough.
Oh my God. And you're Ron Placone. Great. Right. All right. Ron. Ron
Yes, that's me.
Placone.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. I'm sorry. I just thanks for going on.
Almost
So,
like Al Capone, but it's
yeah.
wrong.
Hello, who's on first? Who's on second? Who's
Jacqueline,
on
welcome to the show. I didn't know you were here either.
I'm never
So,
first.
Let's get things started here, fellas. We talk about current events. We talk about what's going on in our lives. Who'd like to begin? Actually, do you want to introduce yourself, Ron? I'm so sorry, I have the order all wrong. Please introduce yourself, and then we'll do what I just said.
Okay. Well, my name is Ron Placone, and good to meet everybody.
Hey, Ron.
What's up?
All right, I guess I'll go second if no one else wants to go. Sorry, I'm walking around here. Just got home, just trying to get set up. But my name is Zach, and I love this group. We hang out every Sunday, and I also have my own channel, which I'll throw out there real quick. It's called the Liberal Conservative Report. Find it on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you can get podcasts, pretty much. And it's part personal vlog and part guests. I have guests on. I interview them. And that's about all.
Hi, this is Jeremy. I'm a UBI activist out here in Missouri. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at Jeremy Sammons1. That is JeremySammons and the number 1.
I am Mia. I am obviously a UBI advocate like everyone else here, except for probably Ron. And I am also a mother to an autistic child on the far end of the spectrum and a caregiver for him. Other than that, I'm also a human, which is, kind of hard to be these days. And that's it. At Mia Songbird on Twitter.
So I'm Ariel. I'm also a UBI advocate. I run a YouTube channel called Revolutionary Thinking, which just talks about philosophy, and I switched more to politics when Yang was running. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at Ariels_Armada.
I'm Jacqueline Homan, and like everybody else here, I'm a UBI advocate, and I speak out and write out a lot about UBI and about poverty. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacqueline Homan.
I think we got everybody except Izzy there.
Oh, it's just me. Okay. Yeah, I'm Ishmael Izzy Bowden. Also a UBI advocate. Well, on the sidelines. I'm not like on the front lines or anything, but I'm also on the autistic spectrum, based in the Chicago area. I have a YouTube channel called Izzyland YT, and as well as a podcast called Izzyland Uncut. Plan on doing the first episode today, maybe later today or so. And what else? Just going through a lot of stuff and whatever, and just trying to maybe someday become a content creator or businessman if possible. And yeah, like I'm a human, and it's like I try to be humanity first as much as I can, because I feel like that is significantly lacking in the society. And there are other cultures that that look out for their own, like what our previous guest Jose mentioned, where coaches like that, who have their own communities. Like they when things like Black Lives Matter aren't needed in their place because they all matter and they all look out for each other. If you reach out, they will help you. And I want to like bring that here in this society. I mean, I feel like Andrew Yang, he he took the first step, whatever. Like he did that, and you know, and I've always wanted to, because of like I see a pattern, a toxic pattern where we're wasting lives and wasting people's times, and and no one's really doing anything about it. So people like me do gotta step up because there aren't many people like me here, just those who throw their hands up, that, and they happen to be the ones in power, so yeah, I mean, I wish I could do more, but and I do what I can. It's like if someone reaches out to me, like I will try something, even if it makes my health worse. Like I don't care about any of that. It's like I don't want that hanging over my head. So yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, so Ron, I think most of us are aware that you were definitely a huge Bernie supporter. Is that appropriate to say? At least I say very supportive of the Sanders campaign.
I mean, I supported Bernie. I voted for Bernie. I would not describe myself as a huge supporter of any politician, especially, as of recent. Like, I mean, usually, as far as electoral politics goes, I mean, yeah, I pick the candidate I feel is the strongest, but that's about as far as it goes. I mean, I wasn't handed my political views because of Bernie Sanders. I had my political views, and Bernie Sanders, was a viable candidate that shared a lot of the views that I held. So, I supported him for president. But, I certainly don't, I'm not a follower, if that makes sense. But I like him.
Perfect sense, yeah.
So, oh, and sorry about my intro. I didn't realize we were like giving a short blip about ourselves too. I thought you were being literal.
No,
we were just supposed to say, "My name is Ron. Hello."
Hey, it's on me.
So I'm sorry
I'm the
that mine
producer, kind of
sucked.
host guy here. I really should have explained it better. It's my bad, but thank you.
You can always go for a second take.
it's like a pirate. It's a pirate ship here. Now
Let me try again.
So
No,
Ron,
it's all good.
I think I'm pretty similar politically to you. I was a big Bernie supporter. At the same time as being a Yang supporter, thinking initially like Yang has got no real chance. And then as Yang's popularity grew, I shifted to being primarily a Yang supporter and secondarily a Bernie supporter. So I really understand where you're coming from. You say you're not a follower. We're just picking the package that most closely matches our ideal. And if you've really done your own thinking, you probably don't have the boilerplate ideal of any candidate or party. So it makes sense to me.
Certainly, yeah. I agree with that. I mean, especially like, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of nitpicky, and this is something that I don't like to talk about often because I don't want people to think I'm being like way too, I guess, nitpicky. But like, I'm not a fan when people say stuff like Bernie crat or Tulsi crat or whatever crat. Like, I'm not a fan of that because that's sort of like, it's giving one person credit for an entire ideology. And it's like, I mean, I know when people use those terms, they don't mean it as anything like that, but it just kind of annoys me because it's like, look,
I think it's a pretty serious problem, right? Because it's divisive. We are given this, we use this language that's divisive. It stops us from being effective coalitions that work together or one single coalition. It's just the politics of identity, taken to
sure
the extreme, where it's like,
Yeah.
I identify as a Bernie person. I identify as a Tulsi person. No,
Yeah.
this is what you're voting for. This isn't who you are. And
Yeah, I
we
mean,
talk about it like it's who we are, and it makes us divided.
I'm with you, man. I mean, yeah, because I'm just like, look, none of these, Bernie didn't invent any of this stuff. Neither did any other politician. I mean, a lot of the policies he's calling for, a lot of other countries take this stuff for granted, i.e. everybody has health care, so yeah, I've always been sort of not a fan when people throw those types of terms around. It just seems a little counterproductive to me.
And I say feel free to take it seriously too, because I think it's actually a serious problem.
Can I ask real quick for clarification for anybody who might be listening, what your position is on universal basic income, since that's a large part of what we are fighting for here on this podcast?
Good question.
Sure. I am for a universal basic income, especially like right now. I'm for just a straight up emergency UBI, no strings attached. I think we need that. And I'm for a UBI in general because, I mean, when you look at the amount that Wall Street takes in, and you look at, I mean, we're talking like quadrillions when you add it all up. For us to get a universal basic income, which, by the way, what Wall Street, I mean, all the money they generate, all the revenue they generate with their, gambling, which is essentially what it is, all that can be traced back to a public dollar. It's not like this isn't our money, our being we the people. So giving us a real UBI would be like the equivalent of taking a speck of sand off a coastline. That's like how little it would actually quote unquote cost. So we can do this many times over. Where I get particular as far as like my support for UBI is I think that other things need to accompany it. Things like rent control. And I don't think that, sometimes people, they're for a UBI, but not for a federal jobs guarantee. I am for both, nor do I think it's unrealistic to say that we can have both. We do have a ton of infrastructure needs in this country. We have climate catastrophe looming. There's no reason why we can't have a basic UBI that, enriches a populace, but also have protection so that it doesn't become worthless, i.e. rent control and stuff like that, while simultaneously having a federal jobs guarantee. I think that we can have both those things. It's very attainable.
100%, I agree.
Yeah, I agree 100% too, because it's like, let's say you do have a federal jobs guarantee, but then someone gets that job, but then they stink at the job or they don't show up on time. Firing them from that job is not a death sentence because of a UBI. Firing them from that job means like, oh, you can't do this job now. We don't have a UBI, and now you get absolutely nothing. And let's say it's a federal job that they don't even like. Well, at least that UBI is there to like prevent them from something bad happening. So I was for a federal jobs guarantee before I heard about the UBI, but I'm like, wait a minute, what if that job sucks or the boss is terrible? So that's why I said, okay, the UBI is a foundation, and from there we can make that federal jobs guarantee, but it's not like your last resort since you have a UBI.
I honestly think they work together very well, but independently, like UBI, obviously, I would say is for me more important. But like when you have them both, you really stop there from being a lot of the abuses that are inherited in the system from people who are able to take advantage of people who can't get a job otherwise or would have to rely on that job. You have bosses who can't abuse you as much because you can always be like, well, this is not my only option. You have people who are empowered to really make choices with what they want to do with their lives. And as the labor market shrinks due to automation, we're going to need more choices.
If I could comment on the question of can we afford both a UBI and a federal jobs guarantee, I'd like to say that the answer to can we afford X is always yes, because any scarcity in government budget is a manufactured scarcity when you are the world's reserved currency. You print money as needed. We can do what we need to do. And that argument has to stop holding water, that we can't.
So
There's only one thing.
That argument needs to be kicked out of the Overton window. It's unacceptable.
well, so I do want to take a contrarian viewpoint on this.
Glad you do.
And it doesn't have to do with whether or not we can afford it. I obviously am a big supporter of a UBI. That's why I'm a part of this group. But the federal jobs guarantee, I think the government is just not good at managing anything. Just about every single government program that we have is a disaster. So I got to stop saying, I tweeted about this like last night. I say it all the time. But anyway, I try very hard not to do it. I think the government should be as lean as possible. And I see UBI as part of the solution. We could take power away from the government, put it back directly into our pockets. And I just can't imagine how a federal jobs guarantee would work in an area where there really is no necessary job to be had. You know, every job that exists because it serves a purpose. But if you have an area where there's nothing that needs to be done, what kind of job are you going to give that person?
I
I
think
mean, are you just going to have them do something pointless? Just show up in an office, stare at a wall for 8 hours a day doing nothing, or pretending that they're doing something just so that they could pat themselves on the back and say, "Good job, you did your job, go home." I mean,
That's the main
it just seems like a waste of money at that point. And I'd rather just give that person money to stay at home and figure out for themselves what can they do to, one, enhance their lives, and two, enhance society. I'd rather just give the people money directly versus pretending to give them some kind of job that isn't really serving a real purpose.
I think you raised some very good points, and I would really agree with you. But I think the solution is, rather than we can't have a federal jobs guarantee, is what we have is a scaled back federal jobs guarantee. But does not need to be nearly so robust, and does not actually need to guarantee a job to everyone after, like, an attempt or something. If there's nothing to do in your area, perhaps the government could help you relocate, right? I don't know.
It's true.
well, the
But
argument uh, uh, like well, I was just going to say that like yeah, the biggest concern is like it's not about getting a job, but what job are you going to get? Because not everyone wants to just settle for like working for the government or just some crappy office job or being in like working at UPS or some other warehouse or whatever. And again, there are those who can't work or do things like or are a caregiver, things that don't really get recognized by the marketplace. And UBI recognizes you know recognizes all of them. And with those that don't work, like they still get UBI, and they like contribute some way to society. Like for instance, Jose, like even though she can't work or whatever, she actually what she did was she actually leaked some info on things like important information about autism and the LGBTQ community and the various stigmas and resources or whatever to the French government and community. And what they're doing is, and this is going by what she told me, what they're doing is in real time they're actually spreading awareness and letting others know about the sort of discrimination and stuff for being like having a severe disability or limitation, or if they have a different sexual orientation and stuff. They're changing that, and at the same time sending it to other coaches as well. So Jose did that, and and that was definitely, I figured that to be a contribution to society. And even though the marketplace doesn't recognize that, but you know UBI, going back to the argument of UBI, um it's inevitable. And what you can't really do anything without putting money into people's hands. Now we can get into all the intrinsic details about how we're going to implement it, but right now we just need to get money into the people's hands because we are in a crisis, we are in a pandemic. Afterwards, once that is settled, now we can get into the meat of it and like, okay, how are we going to get this passed without causing inflation or causing all these other problems? And that's where you consult people like Scott Sands and Andrew Yang, those who looked at the numbers and did their homework on things like universal basic income. Because there's one thing about being an advocate for universal basic income, and then there's the other for like really putting it into practice and really like actually talking to those people who are about UBI. Like if you're very serious about it, and there are other factors like we got a terrible GDP That's why everything's so messed up and out of order. We got to watch out the corruption. We got to, make shorter term limits. We got to bring like-minded individuals into Congress, those who are,
So,
humanity,
Izzy, what are your thoughts on the federal job
I
guarantee?
should probably give Ron a chance to respond because he hasn't gotten a chance to since
Yeah.
we started bringing
Yes,
up
thank
the
you,
federal
Mia.
jobs guarantee.
Ron, please, how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, so responding to some of the stuff about a federal jobs guarantee, it's not like a federal jobs guarantee does not mean like, the government's going to run into your home and force you to work. Like, that's not how it will work. I mean, there's a number of different ways it could be implemented, but basically it would be a thing where there's just funds available. And there's like I'll give a couple different for instances. All right, so I'm a comedian. I work in show business. Let's say I was writing on a show, and that show ends, and nothing's really being produced right now. Maybe there's another pandemic. Who knows? And I'm really kind of out of work. If something like a federal jobs guarantee existed, I could go, hey, you know what? I'm out of work for a little bit, but I want to do something. I want to get some more income coming in. I'm going to go make solar panels for a couple months until I get another writing gig. Somebody who had seasonal work could do something like that. There would be something like this podcast, for instance. There would be funds available that people would get compensated for the content that they put out into the world, which, by the way, you can tie this into something Andrew Yang proposed. My favorite policy from Andrew Yang was his idea for a journalism fund. That was a really, really cool idea that other countries have done. That's something we used to have in the United States before the 20th century. He's the only presidential candidate I've ever seen bring something like that up. And unfortunately, no one talked about it. But it was really cool. So something like that, tying that to a federal jobs guarantee, there would be resources allocated. So that, a podcast like this or a podcast like anything else, or like if people started a newspaper, they could get actual funding and compensation for that thing because they're adding to, democratic dialogue. So that's kind of what a federal jobs guarantee would be set up to do. It's not like you would have this scenario where somebody is forced to work at some job or there's no jobs available, so they make one up. It would be, a productive program.
Jacqueline had something she'd like to say real quick too, and she hasn't had a lot of speaking time. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I'd like to respond to after. So just raise my hand already.
Right. I just wanted to add that, and I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass, Ron. Okay. For the record, I used to be a Bernie supporter, and I enjoy watching you on the Jimmy Dore show. Just FYI. But let's talk a little bit about this jobs guarantee, okay? Now I'm presuming you're familiar with the fact that it's Stephanie Kelton who put together that jobs guarantee plan, and based on that assumption, let's talk a little bit. Let's deep dive this. Okay, great. We have this jobs guarantee. What are you going to do for the people who are literally too poor to get a job because they don't have a car, they live in a rural area, and they're they're 50-year-old ladies or 40-year-old ladies? They're not going to be able to do those shovel-ready jobs. Okay, so now there's going to be a logistics issue with how to implement this, and there's also going to be the issue of, with any kind of job, there are upfront costs that are inherent with getting and keeping any kind of job, even a government guaranteed one. Okay. A lot of people are not aware of this. You can literally be too poor to just get a job. Second, who gets to decide if or whether or not you're too disabled or your duties as a caregiver should count as work? The problem that I have here with this is that ultimately somebody else gets to have literal life or death power over your life. They literally get to say whether or not you get to live or die if you have this federal jobs guarantee, but no UBI, and without recognition of caregiving and stuff as work too. There's been a lot of problems with people not acknowledging that aspect, and also not acknowledging the fact that, that disabilities are real, and not everybody can work outside the home. And just because they can't, that doesn't mean that they're all tech geniuses, that they can just go get computer programming jobs off of Upwork either. So I think what we really need to talk about here is number one, deciding on, are we, what kind of society do we want to have? Do we want to have a society that recognizes that human rights are universal? Okay. And if so, then that means whether or not somebody has a quote unquote traditional or paid job, that they still deserve to be able to live. And the problem I see with the federal jobs guarantee is that you have a bureaucracy that's implemented where somebody still gets to decide, whether or not you're too disabled. We have that problem now without or any kind of social floor in our society at all, or safety net at all. And the problem is with the means tested programs, specifically SNAP, which by the way has been utterly useless during the COVID pandemic. Try using a food stamp card when you have no car and you live in a rural area and you have nobody to help you with rides to the nearest supermarket 10 miles clear across the county. Instacart doesn't accept the EBT card, okay? And, you've got these problems with the means testing with, and I'll give you another example, SSI, okay? That in order to get an SSI allotment that's not even enough to live on, you have to not only be destitute, you have to stay destitute, and you have to, get a divorce. If, you're married and your husband has $1,000 a month Social Security retirement, income, and you live in a house that you both own together, okay? And you're disabled, medically disabled from chronic health issues, you can't get SSI. In fact, I think somewhere around 76%, I'll have to recheck the numbers on this, of people who are literally too disabled to be able to compete in the job market are denied SSI, even though they're clearly medically disabled enough. And I'm talking, very severe medical disabilities, that no employer and no group of coworkers is going to accommodate any workplace. So while the federal jobs guarantee, initially, before I ran away from the Bernie camp completely and, stopped, supporting him and became a very, very passionate Yang supporter and UBI supporter. One of the things that struck me as pretty impressive, what I thought at first, that oh, great, job guarantee. This will solve the job discrimination that women and disabled people, workers over age 40, blah, 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 are up against. However, it still boils down to you have this issue that you're not guaranteed to get a job that you're, number one, good at, number two, are able to get to, number three, have the bare minimum economic level of economic resources and stability to be able to get any kind of a job. Like transportation is a huge issue in the rural areas, right? And you still run up against this wall of, if you are disabled or you have duties like Mia, who said in the beginning of the show, she's a caregiver, okay? You still have to somehow prove your worth or deservingness of being able to survive to some bureaucrat who gets to make a life or death decision over your life. I really have a serious problem with that.
Don't we have that problem now, though? I mean, don't we have all those problems you just described? Don't we already have those?
We have those problems now, but the way to fix them is not with more means testing programs or bureaucracies or paternalism, because that's what has failed.
You gotta go the right way about it.
Let's do something that has not failed.
Oh.
Let's give people a UBI, and it's not charity. I'll tell you what it is. UBI is recompense, number one, for our data, number two, for our access to the natural resources of the earth, that most of us don't have access to over centuries and centuries and centuries of governments defining through property rights laws who gets to have access to the natural resources we need to live. UBI is kind of a rent payment to everybody as compensation for our loss of access to the commons. And it's fair. It goes to everybody, and that's what makes it fair. And
Yeah.
because it's not a paternalistic means tested program, there is no nerve wracking, debilitating, and humiliating set of hoops that you have to jump through to prove every month or every 6 months or however frequently you must do so, that you have to prove to some bureaucracy or bureaucrat that you, quote, deserve to be able to get what you need to survive.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
that's the issue that I think we really need to have an honest conversation about. But that would require having an honest conversation about the actual levels of how bad poverty is in this country, and the fact that disabilities do exist. Not everybody can work outside the home, and also the fact that no society on the planet, I don't care what society you're talking about, no society would exist without the unpaid labor of women, and specifically mothers. And you know, the fact that this does not count as work. This was what Newt Gingrich and a lot of the neoliberals in the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party pushed through in the late 80s and 1990s to justify the Welfare Reform Act, which collapsed the floor underneath the feet of America's poorest, most marginalized, and disprivileged women and kids. Was this idea that being a mother was doing nothing, that being a caregiver was nothing, and that this wasn't work. Now, I'm sorry, but I think we really need to have honest conversations about these things.
Ron, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Not really. I mean, those are all valid points. And I mean, I'll reiterate again, I'm for both the UBI and a federal jobs guarantee. So I don't think a federal jobs guaranteed, if unrolled properly, as well as a UBI unrolled properly, would exacerbate any of those problems you mentioned. I think it would help to start solving them. You know, I do think that disabled people are very much neglected in our society right now. That's a huge problem. It's also a huge problem that healthcare is tied to employment. That's another huge problem. So yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Those are all valid points. And to my understanding, the federal jobs guarantee would also compensate homemakers and stuff like that.
There wasn't a lot of information on what the federal jobs guarantee was going to actually entail on the sites that had the propositions for it at the time. If more clarification has been made, I would absolutely love to see what those platform adjustments were. But at the time, every time I would look, when somebody would bring up, I think that disabled people are covered in that, not when you look at the actual paperwork they released. There was just kind of a skirt to the side mention of disabilities and not really a lot of detail. And when you're in the position where you are caring for somebody who's disabled, or you are somebody who's disabled, it's really important to you that you do know what those details are for you. But also, I do agree that in tandem, they're probably fine, you know, together, because then you give people the power not to have to rely on the government for their basic necessities, and therefore they're still choosing to have the job guarantee. That's my opinion.
Can I jump in a bit? Like that's a great point you made. Like I just want to follow up. So it's like so Ron, I believe Jacqueline mentioned this as well. About there are some people who who are disabled, and but they can't get like approved and stuff, and that actually happened to me. I'm now getting uh SSI, but I needed a rep. And mind you, as far as like job is concerned, believe it was summer of 2018. I tried a to tried a local grocery store I believe called Waltz or whatever, nearby. And um, in the middle of it, like it was raining off and on. And for me, like those sorts of things like really throw me off. And at the same time, uh, I was starving and there was barely any food in the house, or whatever. Well, none really accessible to me. And so I was like scrounging for what I could find. But I was in the middle of the job, and it got so bad. And like I was like really putting a lot of work and stuff. Um, it got so bad that I actually had a major panic a- panic attack. I couldn't focus or anything. And the moment my lunch break came in, like I quit on the first day. That's how bad it got. But um because like my disability wasn't so apparent, people are like, well, you quit your job, and it's like, you're at the age where you should be, and you should be doing this and that. Even though like I not only I'm on the autistic spectrum with but I also have like various other underlying disabilities that really affect how I work, and also deal with like the environment and people that I'm around. But a lot of people, they didn't see that. All they saw was, I was in my 20s, and and I was a black male, whatever, and living with parents, and I was unemployed, and so I should be able to do this. That was the narrative. Um, and yes, like the, like even if I was just given a job or whatever, it's like they'll probably just let me go anyways, because because I wouldn't last an hour without like either collapsing or just getting like just such a mess. And even though like I put in a lot of effort doing what I can, is that that's just how I am now. So, and but but because I didn't look like I was disabled, people got all frustrated with me. So yeah, like that's why I want to mention, like there are people who have severe disabilities but don't look that ways. And then yeah, but yeah, okay, go ahead.
Zach had wanted to say something a little bit earlier.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to address basically what Izzy and Jacqueline were both saying, but also something that Ron said that caught my attention before. I think that the main issue is decoupling economic value with human value. And if you have to work to survive the way things are right now, right? Those two things are intertwined when they really shouldn't be. Like I support universal basic income. I think most federal and state level programs should be gutted and rolled into UBI, except Social Security and SSDI, right? People who have barriers to entering the workforce for whatever reason, they should get a larger universal basic income so that they could survive. Um, what Ron said that caught my attention and I wanted to comment on before was the federal jobs guarantee putting people to work to make solar panels. I mean, you could still get a job making solar panels right now if you want to do that in the private sector. Certain things are just much better done by the private sector. If the government intervenes and starts competing against private companies, a lot of these companies aren't going to be able to compete against the government, and they're going to end up shutting down. And, like we do have a climate crisis. We have to solve it. And that's going to take the private sector and the government working together, not competing against each other.
Considering the private sector is mostly focused on oil and gas, I would argue that what you're saying is not accurate. We actually do need some significant intervention, because the private sector has been concerned with oil and gas, has been concerned with drill baby drill and business as usual, because they're only concerned with padding their pockets. They don't give a hoot about this climate. So, what you're saying that, the government would drive them out. When it comes to climate catastrophe, that's not a bad thing. In fact, I embrace that.
Well, the largest investor in wind and solar actually, I believe, is ExxonMobil. You know,
That's
it's the
only
energy
because
sector.
that's because of the setup of Wall Street. That's because of the setup of Wall Street, because they drive the resources in this country. That's how it's set up. Under a federal jobs guarantee, stuff like that would start to change. And, you know, to your credit, I mean, I'll say this in response, though. There are some people, like, I believe, was it that guy at, like, Blackstone or something like that, who said that he's not interested in investing in oil and gas anymore. And hey, that's a good thing. Hopefully he's sincere. Hopefully that's comes through. But as far as like addressing climate catastrophe, I think to just put your faith in the private sector is just straight up delusional. It's not going to happen.
Well, it's not complete faith. I do think that we do need some regulations. I think the government needs to incentivize the private sector to make more investments in renewable energies, as opposed to giving more permits to drill more oil wells. You know, so there certainly is a role for government to move the needle in the right direction. I just don't think directly employing people to make solar panels is the right way to go about it. I don't think the government should be manufacturing.
I would like to maybe offer a small counter argument in that having the government producing a version of a product would create a floor for how much people who are in that industry have to compensate other people in order to be able to justify their existence. So the government can definitely pay you blank number of dollars per hour for this job. If the private industry can't sustain paying a living wage and the government can, maybe your business doesn't deserve to survive.
Right. Why do businesses feel like they are just given the right to survive, but people, no, not them?
Well, that is a major problem, and that's not capitalism. That's not the free market.
Yes, it is.
Right? No, that's socialism for big business. We don't have a capitalistic society right now. You know, right now, if we were a free market country, all the airlines would have just went out of business when this coronavirus hit. Instead, government comes in, bails out big business. They bailed out the financial sector during the 08 crash. That's not a free market, you know? I mean,
yeah, I think the issue you touched on is that the free market cannot exist within capitalism. Capitalism is an inherently perverting force. It can't have a real market. Can't create or sustain one.
These are such complicated issues. I really love that we get into like the weird nitty gritty of the things that you know, like there's a lot of stuff that are really just like taglines, but when you get into the details, there's a lot of gray area that a lot of people.
Well, here, this country, we have the worst of both worlds. We have socialism for the rich and well-connected, and we have rugged individualism for everyone else. That's what happens when you privatize profits and you socialize losses. If you had a stupid drunk uncle who like went gambling in Vegas and he won a shit ton of money, and then he said, "Oh, but I'm not giving you any," but then he loses a shit ton of money and says like, "You have to compensate me for that. You have to give me," and he goes and breaks your piggy bank. That's what we have.
I think Ariel summed it up pretty well, and I would go to say this is what neoliberalism is. It is the socialization of misery and suffering and hardship and rugged individualism, and the privatization of obscene profits. Now, it's not that profits are a bad thing. It's not that collective responsibility is a bad thing. What makes things a bad thing is when you have a situation of who is watching the watchers, when you have a lack of accountability to the people, the public, you know. And when I mean by a lack of accountability, I mean by situations like with what just happened with the COVID relief that went out. It has still not been, we have people in this country that have already died because they were unable, they had no incomes, they're without transportation, and they were unable to use their food stamps to go get food. Many of them, you know, ended up you know, a lot of it, I wouldn't be surprised if these were diabetic related deaths. Okay. This is an issue that I happen to be very focused on as somebody who is diabetic and lives in a rural area. And yet it's like we're talking about no accountability, and it's this, you know, the fact that this kind of oversight, this kind of negligence was allowed to just go on. And somebody telling me, oh yes, well the government's working on hashing it out now. Well, that's nice. 4 months into the pandemic, you know, this is why I think I tend to lean more with what Zach, you know, had to say about making sure we have a social floor and that it's streamlined, and we don't have these paternalistic bureaucracies that, excuse my French, would fuck up a wet dream.
Yeah. Just to put a bullet on what I was saying. And you know, in response to both Jacqueline and Zach, Ron, when ownership does not participate directly in production of the good or service to be marketed, a productive incentive structure cannot be achieved by the market. That's my hypothesis. That's what I want to put forth in response to that.
Well, and I got to say something that's incredibly important here. You know, wet dreams do get fucked up all the time. They're called alarms.
I'll take your word for it. I don't have the right junk or business equipment or whatever to comment on that personally.
I just got to keep it focused on the important things here.
Jeremy, you had mentioned you had a few questions for our guest, and we are kind of running low on the amount of time he said he had. Would you like to get a couple of those out there before he has to go?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Ron, definitely you've been in the kind of in the forefront of the push for the new media as it's understood. I'm just if you could briefly describe what new media means to you, and exactly what are some of the issues that are inherent with the current establishment legacy media.
Okay. Well, I guess new media means to me like just kind of internet driven media, you know, I mean, online video, podcasts, streaming, and, you know, short messages via Instagram and TikTok, which, actually just got on that recently. I don't really know how to use it, but I am there. And, you know, some of the issues that I'm a really big proponent of is net neutrality and municipal broadband. And net neutrality is the law that all traffic on the internet needs to be treated equal. You can't throttle, you can't have paid prioritization. And this doesn't allow companies like Comcast and AT&T and Verizon to, you know, prioritize some services online over others based on their ability to pay. You know, a basic, for instance, would be a podcast like this wouldn't load very fast, but CNN loads as fast as can be, or Fox News loads as fast as can be. Net neutrality is the policy that doesn't allow all that. We've had assumed net neutrality since the advent of the internet. The cable companies took it to court in 2014. They won, but what the Obama administration FCC did, and keep in mind, I will say this, they didn't do it because they wanted to do it. They did it because the public was screaming at them and basically forced them to do it, is they got net neutrality on the books by designating the internet a Title II classification, which means it's a utility in our life, which guess what? It is a utility in our lives. It deserves that classification. That's the right classification for it. The Trump FCC has since repealed this. So now we're kind of fighting it out in the courts. States are trying to pass their own net neutrality bills. And like here, where I live in California, we do have a net neutrality bill that passed in, I believe, last year. And which brings me to the next point, which is municipal broadband. What that is, for anyone that might not be familiar with that term, that basically means just city-owned internet. And there's municipal broadband in different parts of the United States. What that does is it ends the net neutrality battle once and for all because net neutrality is kind of written into the charters, and the city kind of owns it. And, you know, the way I like to put it, and in its most basic way, whether you are the poorest resident or you're the mayor, you want your porn to load as fast as can be. So you're going to get good internet. And there was a study out of Harvard in conjunction with the Institute of Local Self-Reliance that everywhere throughout the country, wherever there is municipal broadband, it is better and cheaper than what big cable is offering. Because when you trace it back to when we first started doing internet in the United States, what the cable companies did was they formed an organized duopoly where they would kind of just cut up their territories and not infringe on each other's territory, and then they would just kind of price gouge consumers as much as they could. When they don't build in certain areas, it's because they feel like they can't make enough money there. As a result, we pay more for internet than a lot of other countries, and we get shittier service. Municipal broadband has kind of leveled that playing field a lot because, you know, the cities are doing it themselves and they're building better quality internet at a better price. So I think that needs to happen nationwide. I'm a big proponent for it. And, you know, it's just one of the issues I try to cover as much as I can to kind of, you know, make more people aware of what it is and what it does. And this is one of those things, you know, I mean, we're talking, you know, we've talked about a lot of issues and you can kind of take them from both angles. And this is one of those things where, you know, across the political spectrum, people are in support of this stuff. People on the right, people on the left, and everything in between, because this is all about, you know, preserving the internet as we know it. And this is all about, you know, I mean, if you want to talk about a free market, well, how is it a free market if it's an organized duopoly where big cable gets to dictate what type of internet access people have? You know, why can't we build our own infrastructure? That's what a free market would allow. So, you know, and it's also, you know, it's also kind of a lot of lefties like it too, because, like, you know, your city's getting involved. So that's something I'm a very big proponent of, and I think it's very necessary. I mean, people make it out like we can't lose the internet, so to speak, but we totally can. I mean, if we were all having a conversation in 1995, none of us would have thought that radio would ever become what it became. But it did, largely because of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that completely homogenized radio. And, you know, once you lose a medium, you lose it for good. So the same thing that has happened with television, with radio, can totally happen with the internet, where we could be telling our children and grandchildren that you used to be able to start your own podcast, and that's not possible anymore because it won't load at all. So.
Do you think that like the death of I mean, I guess just say just a blanket statement like the death of television? Do you think that's inevitable at this point?
You know, I don't know, man. It's tough to project because television, I think, as far as the medium is concerned, I mean, we could get to the point where most people are just kind of on their computer screens, but I mean, there's still like, I think we're shifting into the world of content. So while it might not be like television in the literal sense, as far as like the actual like medium's concerned, I think like as far as like big production companies and different outlets and stuff like that, I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. And we're already seeing, you know, adaptation like with stuff like HBO Max or Disney Plus or, you know, Hulu, Netflix, obviously. I think we're going to be entering a realm where it's just sort of like we all have a bunch of random subscriptions and they're all going to kind of bundle. So I think as far as like the anatomy of how television works, I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. As far as like how often will we be watching it on a television, that I don't know. Probably a while longer because people just prefer it. And I think that cable packages, quote unquote, are going to evolve a lot over the next 5 to 10 years, but I don't think they're going to go away entirely.
So you're like expecting a format jump, but not necessarily like a media jump. Like they're still going to produce the same way in television, most likely, just move it online as opposed to.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a pretty good summary. Yeah, I would say that's how I feel.
I got a question for Ron. I definitely agree that the internet should be considered a public utility. People are also arguing that Twitter and YouTube and Google, these should also be considered public utilities. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with those people. I think that, and again, I understand it. It's a kind of, it's a very kind of touchy thing, but I think that when you get to the point of a Facebook or a Twitter or a Google where you are really the E-town square, it should be considered a public utility, because right now we are faced with a pretty unprecedented thing where these big tech companies have power that they just have no qualification to have. A Silicon Valley tech person shouldn't be deciding what is and isn't free speech. They just have no qualifications to do that. It just makes zero sense. Yet they're put in these positions where Twitter will, shadow ban people, and they will do, they'll take stuff down. So I think you need intervention where they need to follow the free speech laws of the United States, and they need to be made into utilities.
And maybe should be run by a sociologist instead of by tech geeks.
Yeah, or just have, have like constitutional lawyers, like look into these issues the same way that you do in the real town square. It's just like, we have freedom of speech in this country, and we have free speech laws that I think are pretty good. Are they perfect? Of course not. There is no, perfect thing, but I think they're pretty darn good. And I think that, if we applied those laws to the E-town square, which is social media, we'd be a lot better off than we are now.
100%. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Hey, Ron,
I also got a question for Ron. It's a quick one. You mentioned briefly that you believe capitalism is at fault for all things that have occurred, in this society or whatever. What makes you so adamant about that? Do you believe like capitalism is all to blame, or is there like other, factors involved, or is?
Well, there's certainly other factors. You can't put it on one thing. And what a lot of other people here have said, and I agree with, is there's that old quote. It's socialism for the rich. It's rugged individualism and capitalism for everyone else. The reason we have the discrepancy in wages is because of capitalism. It's because we have a system where profit is favored above all else. And again, we can get back to Wall Street here. The way Wall Street works is that, everything is a portfolio of assets. And the only thing that matters is that bottom line. And in that portfolio of assets, they want the next billion-dollar idea. They don't want the next somewhat good idea. They don't want the next idea that's going to employ a lot of people and work well. They want the billion-dollar idea. They'd rather go billion or bust because it makes their portfolio better. So they invest in all these things and then bet on all these things. And the bottom line is favored above all else. Who does that leave out? Well, that leaves out you, the worker, we, the people. That's who it leaves out. That's what capitalism is set up to do. That's what it has done every time it's ever been tried. It is set up to inevitably put all of the power in the hands of an elite few and leave everybody else out to dry. That's literally what it's meant to do. When you look into different forms of socialism, different forms of anarchy, there's all these kind of particulars where like a lot of different principles and systems could work very well in a society. Capitalism, on the other hand, is always just set up to do the exact same thing. And whenever people are asking, well, is there a way we can do this ethically? The answer is no. I mean, we keep trying it and trying it. It does the exact same thing. And here's the problem. We're taught, and when I say we, I mean like in the contemporary United States, we're taught to attribute all of these factors to capitalism when in fact they have nothing to do with capitalism. We're just taught that they do. So we entertain this fantasy that capitalism isn't an absolutely horrific idea. One example is markets. we're taught that markets can only exist within capitalism. That's not true at all. And, you know, we've been talking about a lot of issues today, and we certainly have some disagreements on the particulars that are worth discussing. These are discussions worth having. But I think we can all agree that you can still have a social safety net, that you can still have a society that looks out for people first, and still have a market of goods and services. The idea that that wouldn't exist without capitalism is absolutely insane. It makes zero sense. We're human beings. We have a natural urge to want to put something out in the world. And if we lived in a not capitalistic society, we would still have people that would want to start restaurants because they have this food that they're proud of that they want to share with the world. We would still have people that would want to invent things, that would want to innovate, that would want to be creative. All of that stuff would still happen. So, you know,
Right.
and yeah,
I think you just hit the nail on the head, Ron. I just want to put this out there. Like, I lost my job due to capitalism. I worked in an electronics store, and I loved, you know, working with the customers and working with the technology. But since it was a seasonal gig, he just said, oh, he literally told me there aren't enough cars on the freeway to like justify the amount we're paying you to work here. But you've been great and we love you and you can come back next season. But like, bye. It's like, I still wanted to keep that job, but capitalism told me that it didn't want me to work. So there you go.
That's not, Ariel, that's not capitalism though. That is big government making, if we didn't have a minimum wage, you wouldn't have lost your job. You know, I mean,
oh, come on, dude.
The problem with something like a minimum wage, which I agree, we cannot just get rid of minimum wage without also having a universal basic income. Right?
Yeah, you definitely need.
But if you look at how the way things are going right now, with a lot of jobs being automated and whatnot, we're going to get to a point where if we all of a sudden move minimum wage up to $15 an hour across the country, there's going to be a lot of jobs out there where that employee is not making $15 an hour worth of value for the company, and therefore the job doesn't justify itself. Whereas if they could instead pay $9 or $10 an hour.
I would like to say one thing real quick. I would like to point out that some of this discussion does cross over very well with how Andrew Yang wanted to redirect the GDP away from just profits. So if we were measuring what our capitalism is producing and how it benefited people as opposed to how it benefited the growth of more capital, then we could redirect how society is taught to view work.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing I wanted to mention too, I wanted to interject here for a moment, is that it's not that capitalism caused Ariel to lose his job. It's not capitalism that caused that problem. Here's what caused the problem. It's not that we don't have a safety net. It's just that
corruption.
Safety nets have been subject to attack after attack after attack for the last 45 years, if not more. And they were never, ever adequate. They were dehumanizing and degrading to try to get help from, if you could get any help at all. I would really strongly suggest, Ron, you check out the book Tyranny of Kindness by Teresa Funicello, okay? And Scott Santons reads chapters out of that, and he puts that out for free on his podcast through Anchor. So I'd really strongly suggest, Ron, that if you haven't gotten a chance to either listen to that book in audio form or pick up a copy off of Kindle on Amazon, that you do so. It's an eye-opener. It would be an eye-opener for you, I think. But what I see as the problem is that we don't have a social floor. It's not that capitalism's the problem. It's that
we're being screwed over.
Starting at zero is the problem. Where where you can't even play a game of Monopoly starting out at zero. I mean, everybody starts out in a game of Monopoly with basic amount of money, right? And when
at least 600. Yeah.
Yeah, and you pass go and you collect $200 from pass and go as you go around the board. You throw the dice and you take your turn and go around the board. The problem is that we don't have a social floor, and I'd like to make this distinction because the difference between the safety nets and a social floor is a level at which we agree as a society that no one, that this floor is a level through which no one can fall, no matter what happens to them, no matter how shitty their luck is in life, that, you know, no one can fall through this floor. However, unlike the so-called safety net programs, which I'm going to speak quite frankly, as somebody who is poor and who is disabled, are freaking garbage. Okay, straight up. You are penalized if you try to improve your life. You are economically penalized, and you have whatever assistance you might qualify for ripped away from you, if you can even get it at all. With a social floor like UBI, okay, you're not penalized if you're able to carve out a niche for yourself, whether it's working for yourself, or let's say, you know, Zach wants to hire me part-time to go over his books for him or something like that. Just FYI, I'm just pulling stuff out of my hat here. You know, there's no penalty. There's no smackdown that I'm going to get for doing that, or anybody else. And I think that's the important distinction here that we need to look at, is that we need to look at, you know, having a system that ultimately works for everybody. And that means that there's a baseline to which we don't allow poverty to exist by establishing that floor, but we don't punish people, you know, by, you know, who manage to, you know, improve their lives and succeed beyond that, by, you know, taking or ripping away that UBI away from them. You know,
Ron has said that he does support a UBI in and
Yeah.
of itself, like not a BI either. Like a BI would just be like not a universal, and I'm sure he's aware
Yeah.
of
well,
that.
I mean, I've seen a lot of people say UBI, and they say, but only people below $40,000 a year should get it. And it's like, oh, wait a minute,
That's BI.
that's not
Yeah.
a UBI, that's a BI.
Yeah, Ron's
That's
pretty
different.
well informed, so I think he does. I think he is. You are aware of the difference between a UBI and a BI, I'm sure.
Yes.
Good.
So
Yes.
so I have a hypothetical scenario I just want to throw out there that I think will kind of better illustrate why I don't think minimum wage is necessarily even a good thing to have. Imagine a situation where you have a high school kid who has one arm and he wants to learn carpentry. It's just something that he really wants to do, right? And he's going around asking, trying to find an internship or an apprenticeship to become a carpenter. Maybe he has universal basic income too, something to fall back on. Okay, bear with me. He's going to have a very hard time finding a carpenter willing to take on that student at $15 an hour when he could instead just hire somebody else with two arms who's better able to do the tasks of carpentry, because that's
Or a
what you
robot.
really need. Yeah, or a robot or something. But I mean, carpentry, electrical work, plumbing, I don't really see those jobs being replaced by technology anytime soon. But the point is, maybe that kid with the one arm can do the task, but it's going to take twice as long to do just about everything.
You're
Oh,
conflating apprenticeships with living wages, though. Those are two completely different things. I mean, that's usually, to my knowledge at least, I have like one friend who's a carpenter. That's kind of how that works. Like, you get an apprenticeship and you apprentice, you learn the craft, and then you are a carpenter.
But you
I
have
don't
to
have
get
a
paid.
problem.
You're usually paid while you're an apprentice too. And in this
So
case,
maybe a government
But
job.
it's viewed entirely differently. It's treated entirely differently. And in a lot of cases, I mean, you mentioned internships. In a lot of cases, internships are completely unpaid. You know, I have nothing against apprenticeship programs, nor do I think living wages contradict that. What happens is, after that apprenticeship is over and you are a carpenter, you are making a living wage. You know, and to respond to some of the stuff you said before about living wages, you know, first of all, if wages kept up with inflation, the minimum wage right now would be at about I believe about $22 an hour if it kept up. It hasn't. And that's a huge problem. And there's no reason why anyone who works an honest job for 40 hours a week shouldn't make enough money to live. There's absolutely no reason for it in the contemporary United States. And if you want to say like, oh, well, it cuts into the profits of a company. Okay, well, then let's start seeing where we can cut corners. Here, CEOs make about 475 times to one that of the average worker. That is unheard of in most other societies, completely unheard of. So we can start there. So, yeah, I mean, I think living wages, that's just a guarantee. I think we should have straight up worker co-ops all over the place,
Yes.
which would, eliminate all those problems completely. But, I think living wages are infinitely necessary and should be guaranteed.
I
So
got
should
a, I got a
only
better.
should only workers be guaranteed to be able to live, or should we say maybe nobody deserves to be poor?
I agree. Nobody deserves to be poor. I'm just saying, if you're working a job for 40 hours a week, an honest job, you should make enough money to live. It's ridiculous that in the richest country in the world, there's people that have to work 2 and 3 jobs to survive.
Well, I do
Yeah,
feel like. What are you gonna say?
All right, I'll be quick, Izzy. Promise. Again, what I was saying before, I just really think we need to decouple income that we get from work and income intrinsic value, right? Market value and intrinsic value, I think, really needs to be decoupled. So, yeah, nobody deserves to be poor. We can address that with the universal basic income. But at the same time, somebody who with one arm who's handicapped, who wants to get into a certain field, who has to compete against able-bodied people, they should have the freedom to negotiate whatever wage they can that would open that door for them to enter that field, if that
I
makes
would like
sense.
to throw in just a really quick thing. I don't care if you are actually literally a lazy piece of shit. I still don't think you deserve to die on the streets. That's
Right.
just
Agreed.
a quick note.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the problem that I've sort of had with a lot of the worker rhetoric. It comes across as a form of classism that Ariel, I think, previously, came up with an excellent word to describe it: workism or jobism. That
Yeah.
all this focus on working people and this excluding rhetoric that I've heard, it's rather off-putting, because that's implying that people who are disabled, people who are old, people who are literally too poor to be able to get a job but are otherwise able-bodied to get one, but they don't have the basic resources they need to facilitate that. It's saying that all these people, entire swaths of the population, don't deserve to be able to survive, don't deserve to live, and they deserve to be poor, that only the workers, deserve.
Also, you have people just saying like, "Oh, just get a job," that'll solve everything.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's the stupidest thing on the face of the planet.
yeah.
I
and-
really have a problem with that. I have a problem with that because, Errol probably would still have his job if we had a UBI, because other people who maybe couldn't get jobs or who got pushed out of the economy, due to automation and age discrimination, which is something we never
Yeah.
really have any discussion about,
Well,
would have been able to go into the store where he worked and buy the stuff.
here's
But the
the
employers won't tell
good
you that.
news. that. No, I'm happy that on hindsight, that I lost it, because I made more money on the extended unemployment in 3 weeks than in 4 months of having that job. So
Yeah, but now the unemployment's running out. So what are you gonna
Yeah.
do next?
we're gonna see what happens. But yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Hey, Ron, I just want to check in with you real quick. How are you on time?
I can go till 5:30.
Well, let me just follow up on like back to like the capitalism thing. It's going to be brief, but I feel like what Andrew Yang was trying to do is like he grew up, him and his parents on a system where how capital is supposed to be, where you do get the gains, where just like the game of Monopoly, and but for some reason, as the years progressed, like corruption seeped in and things went out of whack, and instead the powers that be and the wealthy, they started taking all the profit, and making profit off of our hard work, our blood, sweat, and tears and stuff. So what I think what needs to be done is, I mean, well, first I believe like once like what Mia was mentioning about changing the mechanism of the GDP, I feel like once we update that, and it is barely requires little to no effort just to fix it. Like Andrew Yang said, just walk down the street to Bureau of Economics, say, hey, we got to fix this GDP. And I feel like once you do that first, you will see a definite change. Then comes the UBI and stuff, and increase the minimum wage will it will increase on its own. You'll see prices go down. You'll see the inflation start to go down. You'll see a completely different just society or whatever. I mean that's I believe that was what Yang was planning on. I mean we never really he lived the American dream, man, but we never really experienced it. That's just like a that's just like a a pipe dream from us. And but I mean I feel like it will be unreal once we've experienced that. And I feel like we will, like, if we can fix the GDP and we get like-minded individuals into Congress, and we start putting money into people's hands, like Jacqueline was mentioning, create that social flooring or whatever, because it is necessary if things go south and things don't go as planned. And you just need something to fall back on. You can't just you know f- just fall right through the cracks, and especially like if you have bills to pay and all this other stuff. So it's like I feel like that is definitely like the step one or two, like just fixing the GDP, and all our questions will be answered. Things will start moving to the right direction. I mean, maybe that is too optimistic, but I feel like that is a necessary step, along with giving people money, universal basic income. Because mind you, um, what the first thing we got, during this pandemic, was a form of financial relief for UBI. I mean, even though it's not UBI or BI, it's just a BS solution, and it's just they gave us just scraps or whatever. But it's still, we did get like a we money was put into several people's hands, and there are people saying like we need more. They're requesting, we need more money. We need something monthly and reoccurring. So it's like, yeah, this it's inevitable. It's a necessary step. But yeah, like once we get money to people's hands and we fix the GDP and all these other things, like then we'll begin to get what we were asked for. And then we can bring in Medicare for all. Or I mean, I'm still a bit uncertain about the I don't even think like the federal jobs guarantee might not even be needed, because jobs will be created just by fixing the systems and stuff, and bringing money into our economy and stuff like that. It will heal on its own. It's like it's like the earth, like even though it's like it's a mess, whatever, it's like it will heal on its own. Same for our economy. So all we gotta do is just make make a few adjustments and stuff, and then boom, you'll see something, you know something different. Okay, that's all I gotta say. But
I want to investigate. Thank you, Isaiah. I want to investigate the claim that Zach made that Ariel would still have that electronic store job were it not for that gosh darn minimum wage. Just that minimum wage kept this
Well,
job from him.
before we go any further, we
Yeah.
are in time for Ron. So if Ron would like to stick around, more than welcome to. But if you do got to sign off, buddy, totally understand.
Yeah, I gotta sign off, but thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much for coming.
And-
It's been an honor and pleasure. You've been a fantastic guest.
Yeah.
Could you
Okay.
let us know where
Yeah,
to
that was
contact
great,
you in
Ron.
touch,
I'm gonna
and
go
so
check out your
people
comedy
know
now.
where to see you and all that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, unfortunately, you can't see me anywhere live right now because the pandemic is breaking my
Trapped.
heart, and then I can't tour. But you can still catch me online, and my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Ron Placone. I drop videos there. I live stream there. I do a show called Get Your News On with Ron. That's most weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Taking a little break from the stream now, but I'll be getting back to it at the end of the month. I am on Twitter at Ron Placone, and my website is ronplacone.com, and that's where you can find all kinds of Ron Placone things, including the comic that I do with my cat Lucy.
Thank you so much for coming. I enjoyed you on Jimmy Dore during the 2016 elections. I got to see a bit of you, and I really appreciated that you were coming onto our show today.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I think it's cool to get to finally meet you because all the episodes of Jimmy Dore that I watched.
Yeah, you
That's-
sound, I think
amazing.
I've seen you on his live shows. Like your voice sounds very familiar. It's like
It was
I've heard
probably
him on the
me.
panel and
What a
stuff.
character.
Are you
Well,
the guy?
character,
Are
that
you the
guy.
guy with the glasses? Like
I do wear glasses. Yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the
All
ginger
right.
with the
He's the one.
glasses.
Okay.
Guys, thanks for having me. It was awesome
Thank you
talking
again
to
so
you.
much.
This was a really, really fun conversation, and I'll come back anytime.
You also
Awesome.
do a great
Thank you,
Bernie
Ron.
Sanders
Hold on.
impression.
Hey!
Peace.
great.
Love you so much. And we'll
Stay
see you.
cool and be
Awesome.
safe.
Stay safe.
Stay
Bye.
cool and be safe.
Goodbye.
Bye
You
now.
too.
That was great. What a fantastic
Email me that
guest.
book. I want to read it.
What a fantastic
And
guest.
Tyranny of Kindness. Tyranny of Kindness by Teresa Funicello.
All right, I'm gonna read it. I'll let you know what I think.
And
let me
Absolutely good.
finish my, my
also
what I was
read
talking about.
also read The World of Normal People by Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll look
Okay.
into it.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Ron.
Go.
Peace.
Bye, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Take care,
Peace.
Ron.
All right. So let me just finish what I was saying. So I also want to address before we move on too far, minimum wage and the claim that were it not for minimum wage, Ariel would still have his seasonal electronics store job. Two questions. One, what's to stop the owners from firing Ariel just to maximize their profits, even without a minimum wage? And two, what's to ensure the store would have enough, would have paid Ariel enough to have had a positive, worthwhile experience working there to begin with, without a minimum wage?
So number one, repeat the first one.
What's to stop the store owners from firing
Yeah.
Ariel to maximize profits, even without a minimum wage?
Okay. So a job is supposed to do a task, right? And there comes a point where you can't just get rid of every single job because you need employees to perform those tasks. Otherwise, the operations of the business just cease and nothing gets done, right? You need employees. So maybe that particular task, because of the season or because of the coronavirus, maybe there are less people coming into a store, right? Maybe that job, the tasks that job is doing is no longer generating at least $15 an hour of value to the company. Maybe it's generating $8 or $9. Of course, you may not want to work for $8 or $9, but there would at least be some negotiating power on behalf of both parties if there was no minimum wage. Maybe Ariel would say, hey, if the boss says, hey, I can't pay you $15 an hour anymore, work has slowed, I could keep you on at $11 an hour. Maybe Ariel says, I don't want to work for $11 an hour. Screw it. I'll get a job somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily result in, some, great scenario where both parties win, but it may be better than losing the job altogether.
So a little follow-up before you move on to my second initial question. What if the job is generating 65 cents an hour for the company? Are you okay with someone coming in there making 45 cents an hour?
Well, at that point, I don't think the job would even exist. I think it would be so low that, I just don't think it would
What
really
if it
exist.
did
at that
though,
point.
and the person working it said, "Hey man, I need the 350 a day that I rake in. It makes the difference. I can afford ramen this week." You know.
I mean, if they're willing to work for that much,
There
then
you go.
sure.
All right.
I mean, I think
Cool.
that's kind of
Free
silly.
market
I don't see
capitalism.
right.
Yeah.
I don't see why somebody would take a job making only that much, when they're going to be able to find another one that's paying way more than that. You know, but I just want to add on to this. This would be with a universal basic income.
Okay.
You know, I think
does make a
universal
difference, yeah.
basic income makes minimum wage less necessary. And I do think that minimum wage, the people it ends up hurting are often the lowest skilled people with the smallest
Not
resume.
not just
yeah,
the lowest
you know.
skilled people, but also the people that tend to be the most marginalized, who are the most
Yes.
traditionally excluded. We're talking disabled people.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd like to
I
jump.
think there's one
Or-
marginalized group that gets screwed over in this, and that is people who immigrate here without legal status.
Yes.
Without a minimum
Immigrants,
wage,
the
those
disabled,
people-
the young.
anybody who is not guaranteed, you know, the universal basic income is going to have the same problem that they have now, in the sense that if they travel here, the corporations are still going to take advantage of them and are still going to underpay them, because they know they can't.
Right.
So if you have granted anybody who was not a legal resident but just considered a resident of the United States, the UBI, you would still fix that problem. But human abuse comes from anyone that you can find to marginalize, to isolate, and to take advantage of. So you do have to be careful of that when you're talking about marginalized groups that would be spared from it because of the UBI.
Yeah,
Now,
I think it's also
Yes, that's true.
I go ahead, but I do want to follow up after you finish.
I was just going to say, if you extend the UBI out to people who aren't just American citizens, you do solve that problem.
Yeah, 100%. I think with UBI, it leaves a door open to a lot of different possibilities. Whether we maintain a minimum wage, whether we roll it back, we can approach it in a lot of different ways. I think ultimately it would lead to a reduction in minimum wage, and you would have what's known as the fair market value for people's labor.
Yeah.
But I think what's dangerous about just raising the minimum wage to like 15 or 20 bucks an hour is that there are so many loopholes around that are already happening now, and they're called 1099 workers.
Yep.
So if you're a
Contract
1090,
workers, yeah.
yeah, if you're a contractor, independent contractor,
I know many. Yeah.
yeah, no benefits, no representation. Most of
You
these guys,
don't even have protection against wage theft. I got burned
no,
for 20 grand in unpaid wages. It was the
Right.
one and only Upwork job that I got as an entry level when I was trying to break into tech a few years back before I finally said fuck it and threw in the towel. So I got
Yeah,
up. But the
if you're
whole
contractor-
dev team was stiffed. I mean, this startup, basically when this woman and her partner got the money from the investors, they literally snorted it up their noses. And
Okay.
my boss didn't get paid. The other two developers, well, one was an intern, and then there was me, a beginner or junior level dev. None of us got paid, and I couldn't just go and tell Penelec, my electric company, hey, will you guys accept karma points for payment?
Yeah.
My
Right.
only recourse
Yeah.
as a 1099 worker would have been to come up with money somehow that I didn't have, to hire a lawyer that would be able to go after this startup located in Texas. And I live in Pennsylvania, right? So we're talking to sue, not as a worker, but as a vendor. That's the legal status that a contract worker has. Now, what happens usually in those cases, and this is what I was told by a free consultation lawyer in this, because I did try to go for my 20 grand unpaid wages, believe me, is that startup would likely, based on statistical practices across the board of an established pattern, is they would have filed bankruptcy, reorganized under a new LLC name, and I would have just been, and the other members of the dev team, we would have just been unsecured creditors, which means that at the bankruptcy we wouldn't have gotten doo-doo, and this is something that UBI can really address. That if you do work for somebody and they turn out to be a real shit ass and they pull a stinky like that, it doesn't mean that your electric gets shut off in the middle of July and your insulin is going to spoil, which means if you're diabetic, you freaking die. Your food that you need to eat to take your insulin spoils and your insulin spoils. We're talking serious shit. Now, I don't see how minimum wage would help people in that situation. I see how UBI would help people in that situation. And I see how UBI is, for lack of a better term, it is, enough money to live. It's right now what we have is that people who are not able to, get, because we've got too few regular quote W-2 jobs to go around for everybody who needs a job who's able to work. And what we're saying to the people who get left out is, sorry, but you get to suffer and die from poverty. And we don't do that to convicted axe murderers in this country because of something called the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. That it is considered cruel and unusual punishment that even if you get somebody like Gary Gilmore, I don't know how up in your serial killer history you guys are, but I'm kind of weird that way. I have this thing about researching about serial killers. Anyway.
Is he up there with Ted Bundy?
Oh yeah, I've researched all of them. Ed Gein, Ted Bundy, Gary Leon Ridgway, Leon Dayton Rogers, I think his name is, or Leroy Dayton Rogers. That's right. Robert Picton. Well, he was in Canada, but BC is close enough to Washington State. So what the hell? Son of Sam. All of them. But the point that I'm trying to get at is that Gary Gilmore and Norman Mailer wrote a book about him called The Executioner's Song. We don't sentence these guys. When we sentence them to death, we keep them sheltered. We don't make them sleep out in the freezing cold under an underpass, okay, and rob them of their blanket that might have been donated and deprive them of access to food. We provide them with housing, hot showers, meals, and medical care. Medical care. Money. It may not be great, okay? But the thing is that what we do to the people who've been pushed out of the economy, who didn't commit a crime and hurt anybody, is we let them suffer and die from preventable diabetic complications. We let them suffer and die from exposure to the elements. And we say, because of this workism, this jobism nonsense.
You would have been better off being a worse person.
Right.
It's like I guess I should have been a serial killer instead of a trafficking victim. At least society would have fucking taken care of me.
Yeah.
We have some
French,
deep-rooted sickness.
When I start truth telling, I'm all gas and no brakes. Sorry.
To bring it back to what we were talking about, 1099 workers. I would say it's probably near 100% of these workers are exploited on some level. I come from a home delivery background. Time and time again, I would see contractors fuck over the people that work for them. Just sorry, I'm not going to pay you. Like a damage claim would come in, like there'd be an erroneous claim that they damaged a person's property or the object that was being delivered.
Yeah.
And so that money would be just taken from that. I can't call them employees because they're not really, employees or independent contractors, but just take their wages completely. And it's a terrible system.
It's almost like they've made it an art form to shaft people. And here's the thing: this is the other thing with this workism that I have an issue with. Nobody can give me back a Monday, and that was the other thing I didn't get to mention to Ron Placone while he was on. But nobody can give me back and reimburse me for my time for a Monday. And that was the other thing. It's like the time is the only commodity that the poorest that the poorest people really have, and to say, well, you only get to enough income to maybe barely survive, if that, is if you're working at a what we define as a work, i.e. job. Um, you know, and that was all stuff that I didn't get to address to him, that I didn't want to go on and run on, but I hope the heck that you guys understand what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, every human being is allotted only so much time in our lives, and it should be considered extremely precious who we give that time to, because
Bingo.
regardless of what you believe, at the end of your life, you're going to have to face whatever time you spent, and what did you spend it on? What mattered to you got pushed aside because you had responsibilities to other people and to a society that didn't care what was happening to you.
Exactly.
That's disgusting.
Exactly. And it's like, when I look back, you know, and that was the other thing. I was a good girl. I was a good girl, guys. Okay. Right. I was a good girl when he said about Wall Street being a casino. I was so tempted, but I was a good girl. I was so tempted to ask him when the last time he walked in to a casino and had to do a Fibonacci retracement on the fucking roulette wheel. But I was a good girl. I didn't say anything like that.
Well, one of the things about Wall Street is with a UBI also, instead of having it be all corporate, people like you and me could instead invest in things that we actually care about, as opposed to people running algorithms to figure out what the best thing to jump on then is. If I'm investing in something, I'm investing in Beyond Meat. If hedge fund is investing in something, they don't even know what it is they're after.
Beyond Meats is on my master list. They have very nice bid-ask spread size on their puts and calls. If anybody wants to learn about options trading, hint, hint, Zach, hi. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, we can do this. It's just, you know, I think where a lot of the stuff gets hung up is that there's this idea that only people that have jobs that is defined as work, you know, matter. And I'm saying no. If I were to have 6 years back of my life that I struggled, I had to go into debt to try to break into tech, to try to learn how to code as a dyslexic, as an older lady, around utility shutoffs. I had to go into debt for a vehicle, which we now no longer have because no income meant the car loan payment didn't get made, right? And did everything humanly possible. I even went the route of trying to, you know, get funded by saying, okay, fine, nobody wants to give me a job. Maybe some angel investor will fund my idea for the jackhammer project, which would have injected some transparency into the efficacy of a lot of these, you know, quote, charities that are actually, you know, shams, but that people donate to, and they think, oh, well, these charities are helping people, but they're not. Go travel 90 miles, the closest place where they had a computer meetup, which was Buffalo, only to not get a chance to even pitch after I put in all that work. And this is after 6 years of struggling with dyslexia to try to learn how to code, as an older lady who grew up on the losing side of the digital divide, you know, who was forced down the society's margins my whole life because of being a trafficking victim when I was 12. And it just maddens me to no end that people seem to think that my time was worth nothing, that, you know, 6 years of my life that I'll never get back. My husband, after seeing what I did to prevent homelessness, when a friend gifted me $350 back in January to trade with, into enough to get the back due property taxes paid, even though I had to withdraw everything out of my trading account to do that once I made the money to do it. And that was by riding the Santa Claus Valley and the Santa Claus Rally in the January effect that enabled me to do that. Not every month is nice like that. But the point being is that, you know, my husband, who got to see for the first time, and he was always the one with the income because I never had the opportunity to earn any throughout my life, right? And he saw what I was able to do, and he was like, now I trust you, and I believe you. I tried to talk about trading with him when I was younger, when we first got married, and he didn't understand it, didn't want anything to do with it. And since he was the one with an income, I didn't have any income of my own to do this with, right? But he said to me, you know, that money that we had to whack out on credit cards and for a car loan, just for you to try to break in, to try to get a chance for a job in this in demand field of the 21st century, the new economy. He says, he goes, looking back, he goes, we should have just whacked that out on as a cash advance, and you could have had that for your trading account. We probably wouldn't be living in a house with the roof literally collapsing on us, that we can't afford 55 grand to get replaced. I probably wouldn't be poor. He probably wouldn't be poor. And I said, yeah, I said, imagine that. I said, the concept of time being worth money, and that's the thing I think that I have the biggest axe to grind with this whole workism and jobism uh, thing that really put me so off to the FJG folks was when I saw them automatically, wanting to go to this federal jobs guarantee, especially as Stephanie Kelton had it designed, and she was the brainchild of this for Bernie's campaign. It completely ignored people with disabilities. It completely ignored people who were literally too poor and not even basically economically stable enough to even be able to get or keep any kind of job, even a quote unquote government guaranteed one. And then all those things are being ignored. And I'm thinking to myself, the only thing I have as a poor woman is my time. And to have somebody feel that it's okay to steal that much time away from me on a carrot and stick where I can never get the fucking carrot, it pisses me off, and that's why I really think we need to have a more cogent and honest conversation about what we mean by work, what we mean by, human rights, human value. And I can't see, having a society that, throws the disabled under the bus the way it does by continuing along that vein of, lionizing workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole. I know that a lot of them say when you mention the working people's thing, they don't mean literal workers. But if you don't mean literal workers, then don't use the literal term workers. It's
exactly.
That's a fair request.
Words have meaning. Language matters.
It's a
and you know what? I'll tell you how much language matters. I made the Associated Press cry uncle after 3.5 years of beating them over the head to make them stop calling 12 and 13-year-old and 14-year-old trafficking victims prostitutes. Right. I finally made him cry uncle. Now, there was a reason for that. And that is because words are some very, very, very powerful sticks and stones. Words not only hurt, they can kill. Words have meaning. Language matters. And I'm sorry, guys. I don't mean to.
Well, also going with like what you're saying about like the workism, jobism stuff. There's and this has happened like especially in the Black community where you have like these older people, these old folks, whatever, who are looking at the young generation, even the disabled. They're like, they're saying like, oh, just work at UPS, just do one of the most, some labor's jobs. Go work at Walmart or something, and then they say like, well, back in my day, I could get a job, I could do this, I could do that when I was your age. And I'm like, well, it's a different time. But then
Yeah.
when you try to argue, when you try to like let them know that like, listen, I mean, first off, I'm not built that way, and secondly, it's their time. No, they'll just guilt trip you and say like, you ain't shit, like you're an embarrassment, or and then when you be like, well, if you think it's so easy, well then why don't you do it? And then they get all pissy and stuff. Um, but then the moment we get something, we manage to get something going for us, now all of a sudden they acknowledge us and say, I remember shoot my grandfather, like when I looked out and got like a internship at a disability agency, my freaking grandfather was like, "Oh wow, I feel so much better," and meanwhile I'm just literally sitting there freaking dead because I just got with done with school and all this other bullshit, and I'm like I can't even I'm not even there. I can't even think. I'm not even there in that vicinity, but all these people are just celebrating when I finally managed to get something. And then when I when it didn't last whatever, because it was a freaking 12-week internship, they blame me and say, well, you know if you're not going to work at this place or whatever, then I ain't helping you pay for your phone bill. I'm not you need to be a grown man and take responsibility, and like and even I think they know, like those with disabilities, like what, even if it's him, I think they know, they just don't give a shit, because it's like,
Yeah.
and it's just a lot of projection involved, because the bosses did to them, everyone else did to them, and
And
and they're
yeah, you're right. And
it's
you know
better
what,
just sit there and
Izzy?
take it.
You
Yeah.
certainly did not deserve that. Okay. And you know what? You bring up such a very hard hitting point that I'm a pain in the ass. I'm going to be a pain in the ass about it too, because, you're right. And that is this idea that, the great working class heroes, the brothers and sisters. This is what I heard during my days as a commie before I became Yang Gang and burned my commie card, and most recently my radical feminist card too. I'll explain later if you guys want to know about that. But this idea that it's like you see how it's all about rah 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 solidarity for the workers until a working class brother or sister gets pushed out of the economy, or becomes disabled and can't work anymore. Then it's, oh, you moocher, you social parasite, you're sucking up my tax dollars because you're getting SSI. There's nothing, you don't look like there's anything wrong with you, and blah blah blah. And it's like, what a bunch of shit. Can I say that on the radio, on the air?
Yes, you can say shit here.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't
It's-
think that we follow George
Yeah.
Carlin's words you can't say on television rules. or
Yeah,
anything.
and I
cool.
think much worse has been said already.
yeah, that's for sure.
Maybe we should have Andrew
I'm
Yang on,
trying
and
to
he could
clean
tell
up
us.
my potty mouth. I mean, I realize.
Right. And then nobody talks about just the people who are just born into inherited wealth, which are like the assholes trying to take the extra unemployment away. Then they already have like tons of money and they never worked a day in their life, but then they rile up their base to like talk about the moochers, which they're the biggest moochers on the face of the fucking planet with their congressional salaries, but then they want to get you angry at the person who lost their job through no fault of their
Oh,
own.
you mean
So
like
fuck them.
This
you mean Ariel? You mean like Kentucky's Mitch McConnell, or as Vic Ghetto
McCon
calls him?
job.
Yeah.
Mitch
Right.
the bitch. Mitch the
You know what they call him? You know what Vic
Mhm.
DiBiddetto calls him? He's a great comedian. I love watching his.
Yeah, me too.
Mitch the chicken
Kentucky-
shit.
A Kentucky
Kentucky fried piece of taint.
paint. Yeah, it's like, oh,
Kentucky.
One
that's
thing
like
that's important to note about those people as well is that their states are also
Kentucky
some
Fried
of the
McConnell.
poorest states that relied the
Mhm.
most on welfare at the same time. Kentucky, I think, wasn't there a town hall where somebody basically confronted him on that, saying, we are the most dependent state of all the states, and you're talking
He's the
about
biggest
independence
leech
and all
on the
this.
face of the earth.
That's an
Yeah,
understatement.
They're convincing their own people that the right idea is good individualism, while their own people depend the most on the safety net of any other state.
Yeah, they're scum, and you see, and this is the workism brainwashing that they fight against their own best interest because they're ideologically married to bullshit, and they're too stupid to understand that,
and it's an incestuous relationship at that.
to their own shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I could think of a whole lot of words, and if I run out of any, I can make up some.
It's just I like we have like the redneckistan parts of the country in the south and the north. We're just like totally ignorant.
It's like I had to explain to my neighbors who are now getting a taste, and they were former Trump voters. They were planning on voting for Trump again, and I don't have anything against them. They're not bad people, but now they're wondering why they couldn't get certain help. I said, well, you know what? Here's the problem. There was this guy named Andrew Yang who had this really brilliant idea, and the DNC, being the fetid,
Pieces of crap.
assholes.
fetid, rotten sepulcher
Those
that
are
it
bitches.
is, okay, whose ethics is somewhere between the toilet and the sewer.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to rant, but Mr. Yang did not get a chance to bring the help that we needed. Here's the problem. We need a social floor. I said, that crap you went through to try to get help for for this family member who got disabled and lost their job and all this, and now you're facing losing your home to a sheriff's sale. I said, you can thank those who basically thwarted the one candidate who would have helped everybody. Because here's my neighbors were told they'd made $10 a month too much to qualify even for food stamps. And I told them, I said, well, you want to know the kicker? I said, now that we're going into shutdown mode again, guess how much those food stamps would be of help to you during a pandemic when the only way you can buy food is A, if you have a car to get to the supermarket, B, if you have money or, in your checking account to use your debit card to pay for grocery delivery through Instacart. I said, which with everything going into shutdown mode again, with only curbside pickup being available and Instacart, I said, your food stamp benefits would be worth less than toilet paper, because at least toilet paper you can wipe your ass. You can't do that with a card. I use my food stamp card to clean out the crevices in my mechanical keyboard because that's all it's worth.
Some
Yeah,
good
this is
news.
why-
Amazon is starting to take food stamps, by the way. If you
Not
got
in my state.
Not in every state, but it's starting to. And keep an eye on it, because a lot of them, because of the pandemic specifically, actually are starting to
I
take
have been
food
I
stamps.
have been a huge enough pain in the ass that Preparation H should have been skyrocketing. Okay, on the makers of Preparation H, that company should have been skyrocketing, because I've been crawling up my congressman's ass sideways about this since in March, when the pandemic happened, and Pennsylvania was one of the states that had one of the most strictest lockdowns. And I was saying, hey, look, we've got shut-ins here, no cars, nobody to help us, no living family to help. There's an elderly lady up the street from us, same situation. She's in her 70s. They gave her food stamps that she literally could not use. Okay. And she still has them. But there was nobody to help with rides to the store. And when a lot of the stores in our areas, they were just saying, no, we're doing contactless shopping now because of the pandemic. And that means you have to use like the curbside pickup if you have a car to actually get there. And to do that, you have to pay for the food online in advance through the supermarket's own website platform. And the one form of payment they do not take is the food stamp card. So when anybody says how great these social programs are, I'd like to tell them to shove it up their ass. Good things don't hurt them. But money saved my life. Money is why I didn't end up going into diabetic coma from trying to take insulin without food, which you need to eat to take insulin, right? It was money that saved my life, because that was the only way I was able to buy food. And nobody can tell me that, anybody who operates along this false premise that we need these so-called programs that are punitive, that are humiliating and debilitating, and about as helpful as tits on a boar hog. I got some words to tell them in 52 different languages, and they all begin with F and end in U.
Yeah, like if I
agree.
had like a UBI, I would have the funds to move, or become a full-time content creator.
Yeah.
And do
I
do
mean,
all
you can
sorts
work
of
for
things.
yourself, and your time is so precious, Izzy.
Yeah.
Your time is so precious. Nobody can give you back a Monday.
No.
That is your time. You know? I mean, should anybody else really be allowed to hold a gun to your head,
Right.
a proverbial gun to your head, and say, give me your time or you
It's-
suffer and die?
Right.
hate when
It's
people waste
it's
my
it's
time.
like
Crap is that?
to a certain extent, it's like we're all being trafficked by these disgusting systems into, things that we might hate or we don't want because of non-UBI. And non-UBI creates a system of just like people being objects and subjects instead of human beings.
Economic
know?
actors, like Andrew says.
Right.
A lot of
exactly.
people discuss how when you're buying a product, you're supporting whatever means they are using to create it, like if they're using bad labor overseas or whatnot. But the
Yeah.
part that often gets left out is that if you have to work for a company who has bad ethics in order to
Right.
survive, you are also supporting those fringe outside things. And in the meantime,
Right,
you're
right.
also being exploited at the same time. So like the amount of terror that is put on a person, the amount of unintended
Right.
consequences that you can be complicit in just to survive
Right.
are
But if we all
incredibly
collectively decide to opt out, they can't do anything. But
What are
that's
they
why
gonna
they
do?
have to.
What are they gonna do? Take away our birthday?
Right, exactly. The thing is that but that's
Don't
why they
tempt them,
have their
Jacqueline.
their
Ah,
propaganda
they-
machines. Their
they can go-
propaganda machines in full blast to drive wedges in between people who can talk to each other and we actually organize. So that's where they spew out their filth on legacy media. So and that's why we have independent.
Well, on that note, we are over time.
Mm.
So thank you all.
Sorry if I had a very bad case of verbal.
It was either
No,
going to
it's
be
fun.
you or me.
Honest to God, guys, I'm
It's
an
okay,
idle
guys. It's all right.
Just,
You're
you know, when I,
entitled.
It's
when I
all right.
get
Entitled.
We're all
when I
human.
get
And
riled up,
just real quick before we go, Izzy, we got a lot of that work shaming in the Jewish community too. My Jewish relatives always like, "Oh, you're so smart. Why can't you just go get
Yeah.
in computers?" Like that makes some
The
fucking
computers.
like that
Shale.
makes any sense in
know.
the world. But anyway, yeah, man. Thank you for listening.
Just learn the code.
My Twitter is at SHAELRILEY. Ariel, you want to go ahead, give your Twitter,
Sure.
talk about
So
the
my
cow?
Twitter is at Ariels_Amada. That's ARIELS_ARMADA. I just put up a video yesterday on revolutionary thinking, youtube.com/revolutionary thinking. And if you want some awesome drone photos, I'm building it out. It's Ariels_Ariels on Instagram. So that's ARIELS_AERIALS. Thank you.
and Jacqueline Homan. I'm at Jacqueline Homan on Twitter, and you can also grab merch off of my Teespring, which is also called 99 Reasons Why, the same as my Patreon, because I can think of 99 reasons why and invent enough words to elaborate on the reasons why for anything. And so there's that. And
All right, well, my name is Zach. Thank you all for listening today. My Twitter is ZACH_SACHER. And once again, you could check out my own YouTube channel at The Liberal Conservative Report.
I checked it out, by the way, Zach, and I checked out Ariel's, and I wanted to say I like you guys' channels.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
I guess I should go next. I am Mia Dunford at Mia Songbird, no spaces, and Songbird as it sounds, but Mia with MEA on Twitter. And yeah, I will be doing volunteer work for Humanity Forward on Tuesdays and Fridays. If you want to come do Humanity Hangs at any time, I'll be there.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Jeremy. You can find me on Twitter at JeremySammons1. That is JeremySammons and the number 1.
Jeremy.
Is it my turn or?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Izzy Bowden. Hope you thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. My Twitter handle as well as my Instagram handle is at Izzy Bolden, IZZYBOLDEN, and I believe it's also for my Facebook. I also have a Facebook page for my brand Izzyland, along with Instagram page Izzyland Graham, and my YouTube is Izzyland YT. Has a lot of the content creating stuff, content creator based stuff, visuals and all that. And then there's Izzyland Uncut, the podcast, and I'm planning on doing my first episode probably today or tomorrow. But then I know Yang Speaks is on tomorrow, so I don't want to compete unless the chief lets me. But um, I also have a support group, Izzyland Support and Beyond on Facebook. So like, if if you need a platform, or if you got something you want to share, whatever, it could be anything. Would it be something fun or just something personal or anything? Just don't be afraid to join. It's like, and you know I'm the moderator, so no BS, no, we treat each other like family and stuff. But yeah, and yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I mean, I do have a Patreon and stuff, but it's like it's not really up. And uh yeah, that's all I have before I like blank out. But
Thank you,
yeah.
Izzy. You can tell us about the Patreon next time whenever it's up. And I would not worry about competing with the boss. People can listen to 2 podcasts a day, or they can listen to yours the next day.
Maybe you'll follow me
There you
afterwards.
go. We love you for listening. We love you watching, and I love you guys for participating. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Be good to each other. Stay safe out there. Don't get sick. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, all.